once again has been caught being even dumber than we thought. Watch as she claims blacks in America have it worse than.
The clash unfolded like a scripted spectacle, a verbal cage match where Whoopi Goldberg's latest remarks became the unwitting target of Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus's comedic onslaught. The spark igniting this firestorm was Whoopi's claim on daytime television that black Americans face conditions worse than women in Iran, a statement so audacious it seemed to beg for scrutiny. Gutfeld and Tyrus, armed with razor-sharp sarcasm and a knack for dismantling rhetoric, didn't just critique her words. They turned them into a comedic demolition derby, exposing every inconsistency, theatrical flourish, and logical misstep with gleeful precision. The result was less a debate and more a masterclass in satirical takedown, leaving Whoopi's credibility battered and the audience caught between laughter and disbelief. The setup was simple but explosive. Whoopi, seated on the set of The View, delivered her comparison with the earnest tone that has become her trademark, a blend of soft-spoken conviction and vague moral authority. She argued that the struggles of black Americans surpass the plight of women in Iran, a nation notorious for its oppressive regime, where human rights abuses include public executions and severe restrictions on personal freedoms. The claim was jarring, not just for its boldness, but for its apparent dismissal of Iran's well-documented atrocities, such as the brutal treatment of dissidents and the marginalization of entire groups. Gutfeld and Tyrus seized on this, framing it as a moment of intellectual overreach so egregious it demanded a response. Their approach was surgical yet theatrical, like chefs carving a poorly prepared dish while cracking jokes for a live audience. Gutfeld, with his late-night swagger, led the charge, mocking the premise as if it were a carnival game rigged to fail. He painted Whoopi's argument as a house of cards built on shaky assumptions, each card a metaphor or exaggeration that crumbled under scrutiny. Tyrus, his comedic partner in crime, amplified the critique with deadpan quips and vivid analogies, turning Whoopi's words into a punching bag for their wit. Together, they didn't just challenge her logic, they transformed it into a comedy routine, highlighting the absurdity of equating systemic issues in the U.S. with the life-or-death realities of an authoritarian regime. The first point of attack was Whoopi's tone, a hallmark of her public persona that Gutfeld and Tyrus skewered with relish. Her delivery, they argued, was a carefully crafted mix of hesitation and sincerity, as if she were unveiling profound truths while tiptoeing around accountability. Gutfeld mimicked her cadence, exaggerating the pauses and sighs to make her sound like a narrator lost in a script. "It's like she's reading an IKEA manual for empathy," he quipped, suggesting her gravitas was more performative than substantive. Tyrus piled on, describing her voice as a kiddie pool of concern, shallow, splashy, and ultimately unconvincing. They turned her trademark, "let's not do that" refrain into a punchline, implying it was less a call for reason and more a deflection from the holes in her argument. Next, they tackled the substance, or lack thereof, in Whoopi's comparison. Gutfeld laid out her reasoning like a map to nowhere, pointing out how it veered from one vague assertion to another without ever landing on solid ground. He likened her thought process to a roller coaster with missing tracks, thrilling but doomed to crash. Tyrus, ever the showman, acted out the mental gymnastics, pretending to juggle contradictory ideas while stumbling over his own metaphors. They highlighted her failure to acknowledge Iran's systemic abuses, such as the persecution of minorities or the violent enforcement of gender norms, which made her claim feel not just hyperbolic but disconnected from reality. If life in America is worse than Iran, Gutfeld deadpanned, then maybe Whoopi should cover her face and call it a day. The duo didn't stop at logic, they dove into the emotional theatrics that underpinned Whoopi's delivery. Gutfeld compared her to a high school guidance counselor chasing trends, doling out platitudes with the urgency of someone trying to go viral. Her "I'm deeply troubled" moments, he argued, were less about genuine concern and more about signaling virtue to an audience primed to nod along. Tyrus took it further, imagining her as an auctioneer rushing through bids of outrage, only to realize no one was buying. They mocked her rising tone, which started soft and ended in a crescendo of melodrama, as if volume could compensate for clarity. "It's like shouting into a canyon and clapping for the echo," Gutfeld said, capturing the self-referential nature of her performance. The social media angle came next, as Gutfeld and Tyrus traced how Whoopi's remarks ricocheted through online echo chambers. They joked that her statements were like stray tweets caught in a megaphone, amplified by supporters who treated her vagueness as profundity. Gutfeld quipped about the carbon footprint of that echo, while Tyrus likened it to airing the same sock twice. Still stinky, still shocking. They pointed out how her fans often defend her missteps by framing them as bold truths, a phenomenon Gutfeld compared to treating modern art as genius simply because it's incomprehensible. Tyrus imagined a gallery exhibit of her takes, complete with voiceovers and ambient self-importance, driving home the absurdity of her unearned moral elevation. Inconsistencies in Whoopi's argument were another rich vein for mockery. Gutfeld described her pivots as a plate-spinning act gone awry, with guilt, empathy, and outrage all wobbling precariously. Tyrus called it moral gymnastics, suggesting she was aiming for a gold medal but landing flat. They zeroed in on moments where she seemed to lament one issue only to slide into another, leaving a trail of conflicting concerns. Gutfeld acted out the confusion, pretending to chase her logic like a dog after its tail, while Tyrus quipped that her opinions were scented candles, nice atmosphere, no light. The critique was sharp but playful, exposing the scattershot nature of her commentary without resorting to personal attacks. The audience's role wasn't spared either. Gutfeld and Tyrus mocked the tendency of Whoopi's supporters to applaud her takes as if they were revelations, even when they defied reason. Gutfeld likened it to a crowd cheering a magician who forgot the trick, while Tyrus imagined them as gallery-goers squinting at a blank canvas and declaring it a masterpiece. They argued that this blind loyalty fuels her boldness, allowing her to drop inflammatory comparisons without fear of pushback. "It's bravery by applause," Gutfeld said, suggesting her courage stemmed not from conviction, but from a guaranteed safety net. Tyrus added, "She's repeating the group chat out loud and calling it revolutionary." Historical references in Whoopi's remarks were another target, handled with a mix of humor and disbelief. Gutfeld noted that she tossed the past into her argument like a banana peel on a runway, creating a hazard without adding clarity. Her vague allusions to American history, they argued, were designed to sound weighty but lacked the specificity to hold up. Tyrus compared it to quoting Wikipedia with a straight face, while Gutfeld quipped that her grasp of history was a symphony of wind chimes, beautiful to some, just noise to others. They didn't dispute the existence of systemic issues in the U.S., but challenged her attempt to equate them with Iran state-sanctioned violence, calling it a false equivalence that undermined her point. The predictability of Whoopi's delivery was another point of contention. Gutfeld broke down her formula: start with ambiguity, shift to mild concern, and end with theatrical exaggeration. He compared it to a recipe for hot air served with a side of studio lighting. Tyrus agreed, saying, "If you've seen one Whoopi monologue, you've seen them all, just change the soundtrack." They argued that this cadence, while effective for rallying her base, eroded her credibility with anyone seeking substance. Gutfeld's final jab, "She's filming creativity on the fly, and it's just a Monday," captured the rote nature of her performance, while Tyrus's "let me be clear, oops" quip nailed the cycle of bold claims followed by backpedaling. As the takedown reached its climax, Gutfeld and Tyrus shifted to mock empathy, pretending to sympathize with the pressures of public life. "We get it, Whoopi," Gutfeld said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's hard to say something profound when the cameras are rolling." Tyrus joined in, suggesting her meltdowns were less about conviction and more about chasing relevance. They framed her as a victim of her own platform, trapped in a cycle of saying something, anything to stay in the spotlight. "No mic left," Gutfeld concluded, implying her outbursts had drowned out any chance of meaningful dialogue. Tyrus's parting shot, "Bring a point next time," was the final nail, a call for substance over theatrics. But the duo wasn't done. They opened a second round of mockery, this time targeting the performative layers of Whoopi's persona. Gutfeld compared her stage pauses to a buffering internet connection, full of promise but light on delivery. Tyrus likened her to a cooking show host gone rogue, tossing in selective outrage and timed disappointment like ingredients in a doomed recipe. They mocked her shift from actress to moral compass, with Gutfeld quipping that she'd traded Hollywood for ethical meteorology, predicting right and wrong with the accuracy of a coin toss. Tyrus added, She's observing with intense judgment, capturing the sanctimonious undertone of her commentary.